Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to talk about insurance, continue our conversations about exploring insurance solutions today, which is going to be great. And we'll have Chris Proudlove will be joining us, and I'll introduce him in a minute. But before then, I always like to ask if there's anybody that is new to the group that hasn't been with us before that wants to do an introduction and say hello.
Hi, I'm actually new. Andrew, we know each other having met, but I'm new to the group. Julia Norsetter. I'm with Reed Smith in their Advanced Air Mobility office. I helped bring that office to light at Reed Smith, informally of FAA, and looking forward to being a part of this particular community because it's very, what the professionals here are very impressive. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. We haven't spent time and probably not enough time talking about legal aspects of what we're doing here, and there's a lot of them. And just like the insurance situation, it's important that we pay attention to that. So your input will be invaluable as an attorney, especially one who's got so much FAA inside and outside experience.
Yeah, I should have clarified that, I'm a regulatory attorney. So as we move towards permissive regulations in this space and not just NPRMs and proposed rules, please do feel free to reach out. So thank you.
Thanks for being here. Anybody else that's here for the first time and or hasn't had the opportunity to introduce themselves yet?
This is Matt Smith. I'm with Air EV. We're a eVTOL OEM startup based in Israel in the US. It's a small two-seater, personal use only full electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle, and we're seeking FAA certification. And so yeah, very interested in this for ourselves and for our customers and that type of thing.
Matt, thanks so much for being here. And we've talked about the hard work you're doing at Air to certify the aircraft, which is no small feat given the fact that certification on a good day is a challenge, but you're in sliding sands and shifting seas with respect to the regulations. So you've got a real challenge on your hands.
Very true, very true.
Well, keep us up to date. We have a lot to learn from your expertise and your successes at Air, but love that vehicle, and I can't wait to fly one.
That makes two of us.
Anybody else that's a first timer and or hasn't introduced themselves yet? Okay, we'll pivot to events, and in the meeting chat, I included some links to some of the working group links, and then also to our events page. One of the next big events is coming up in February. Out here, I'm out in Northern California right now, and it'll be at near San Jose, Silicon Valley area in February. That's the eVTOL symposium. So that'll be a good one to put on your calendar. I'm planning to be there. Any other events that people are planning to be at that are of interest or have recently been to that might have notes on for us?
Did you mention the
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Andrew, did you mention the 2 ASTM meetings upcoming, or?
No, talk to us about
that. In DC, there's the fall main meetings for the F-37, which is the Mosaic all aircraft types. So what used to be light sport, so it's the expansion of light sport. An entire week or entire 4 days of meetings for them, all different aspects: power plant operations, pilots, aircraft certification, and then the same for the F-44, which is the standards group for standard, like type certified small aircraft, Cessnas, Pipers, Beechcraft, that type of thing.
Now, are those open? I remember bumping into those meetings. Are they open or closed? Were they invitation only?
They're ASTM only. ASTM members. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So if we're not members, hopefully we know someone who is, and maybe we'll get a report after that from attendees, because that sounds like that's some really good meaty stuff that's going to happen there.
Yeah, and I think they're each section of meetings, I think they're 3 or 4 deep, per class time, basically. So 3 or 4 deep for F-37 and 3 or 4 deep for F-34. So we'll do our best to cover what we attend here and brief it if anybody's interested. So.
Outstanding. No, that's great. Thanks for the heads up on that. That'll be some good progress there. Did someone else speak up with respect to meetings, past, present, or future?
That might have been me, because we do have the National Business Aviation gathering next week in Las Vegas, in case anyone's in town. That's a great one. We're going to have the Emerging Technology Zone set up there again, where we have a lot of eVTOL, AM companies. We have a lot of tech companies. We have this, I think it's going to be out in the main floor, but there's a sustainability summit going on. Chris will actually be running a panel on drone usage to help with sustainability. So we have a lot of really good topics that are moving into the the business aviation and corporate aviation space to start to really generate that conversation, in our space. So that's next week.
Perfect. That's a good one. I used to sell corporate jets and helicopters. So that's my first NBAA I went to was in 1995 to date myself quite a little bit.
It's a great show.
Yeah. I flew out in a Gulfstream. And I was like 2 months out of graduate school. So I was like, well, I'm obviously a big deal. And then it turns out aviation's a lot of work, but that was a fun day for me.
That's great, Andrew.
No, that's an awesome event. And I'm really happy to see that it's adapting and updating and adding the third wave of aviation to the itinerary there. And I need to go to, I think does it go back and forth between Las Vegas and Orlando still?
Not anymore. I think they're pretty much keeping it in Vegas for the next couple of years. It's just grown to that, to that huge level at this point.
They're
They do
so
have the static.
big. Yeah.
They actually have Volocopter on static this year. I think there's a couple of other eVTOL manufacturers that are going to be on static. That's like mind blowing that we're mingling. Like it's there. So it's really exciting.
I love that. All right. I'm going to put that on the calendar for next year.
We're sending Ken Schwartz from VFS to attend. So he'll be there and supporting for us and talking to Volocopter like you brought up, Tony.
Oh, great. Thanks. I'll look out for him.
Ken's a lot of fun. That'll be good. Any other notes on events?
Just briefly, there was the Aerospace Summit in Washington, D.C. just a couple of weeks back. And for those of you who were able to attend, they had a Archer prototype that folks were able to, see, and kind of like Tony was saying, hard to believe that we're there. So it was well attended, a lot of folks there. It was also commercial aviation, like mainliners, but a lot of AAM present. So happy to chat more if anyone wants to learn about that event. Thank you.
Good one. Good one. Perfect. Any others? All right, perfect. If you think of anything, or if you've mentioned an event that you have notes on, feel free to add it to the chat so we can jump into the website and see where to go and hopefully meet up there in person. So I'll pivot to the working groups themselves right now. One of the things that I've been exploring is the idea of adding to our conversation more content speakers and talking about the commercial side of eVTOLs and AAM in general. In other words, this working group has been focused fairly specifically, or at least in name, specifically on short range and recreational use aircraft. We also have a working group that focuses on public services that Johnny Du leads. And what I am wanted to talk to you about is the idea of adding more conversation and pivoting some of our attention to the commercial space, some of the larger aircraft providers, infrastructure, things like that. The Jobies, the Liliums, and Volocopters of this world. I wanted to put that out for your thoughts and comment. Would that be of interest to people?
I'll speak up. It's of interest to me for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, me as
Yeah,
well.
me as well. Thank you.
That would be, this is Charlie. I think that'd be beneficial. I mean, we're all moving the industry forward. So the more we can collaborate, I think the better.
Yeah. And I want it to be an additive thing. That's not to say that we don't want to continue to have conversations with, you know, the Part 103 providers, the LSA providers. That's all part of the mix. I just want to add more conversation and content in that space. And frankly, you know, there's only so many providers in the LSA space and Part 103 space. And by the way, Matt, anytime, you know, you'd like to do an air overview or update, we'd love to hear it, and that all fits in. But I just wanted to have a reason to go to the Jobies and Liliums as well, and pull in some of their folks to bring us up to speed on what they're up to.
Sure.
Any negatives? Yeah,
I put the link. I put the link in the chat.
Perfect.
Oh, and one more event last month was the grand opening of the National Advanced Air Mobility Center of Excellence in Springfield, Ohio. And that's also coincided with Joby announcing that their primary manufacturing facility was going to be located near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio as well. So
That's super cool. Have you been there, or do you know what's there or going to be there, Matt?
yeah, it's basically a facility. It's like an incubator for AAM technology. So they went all in. They took state money, local money, Air Force money, and private investors, and built that facility. Started building that facility 2 years ago. It's the only airport I'm aware of. I think actually there's 3 airports in the country that have specialized new radar system for doing see and avoid for unmanned air vehicles. So
Yeah,
like
Matt,
an ADSB type
it's-
thing. Yeah.
This is Mitch. I was part of the team that brought the BV loss category and funding together in the state of Ohio from 2015 to 2020. And you're absolutely right. The beyond visual line of sight, 10,000 feet and below, in this gigantic trapezoid that's connected between London, Ohio, Columbus, and Dayton and Springfield that's a really cool opportunity that they've been able to put on the forefront. So to your point about having that incubator and hangars for people to actually set up in and fly alongside commercial aircraft, it's a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, office space, meeting space, etc. Yep.
Is it something could we just go there? Is it an appointment only sort of thing? What's the setup like there? Is it like an FBO kind of thing where you just stroll in?
They were doing tours during the grand opening, and again, it's not fully operational yet, but they're starting to build out, and it's built, and they're starting to finalize rooms and stuff like that. Sounds like Mitch might know more than I do about the status of tours.
Yeah, you're actually spot on. They're almost there. They are going to have point people on site that man that facility. There'll be absolutely, you can do tours. But then the actual representatives are part of the team from City of Springfield itself. They have a economic development group that's spun out this funding to be able to have a representative on site at all times. So yes, you can do that.
Did I remember that they have some simulators there? Will Joby have a sim there?
Beta already has one on site in a vertiport there right next to it. And then Joby used to have one, and they're going to put one back in. And then
they brought theirs to the grand opening.
Yeah, I didn't mean to steal your thunder there, Matt.
Oh, not at all.
The additional Elroy has been talking about the same thing. And then with all the contracts that are 25 minutes down the road at Wright Pat, everybody's been talking about the same thing. And so there's a real big push in public acceptance and letting the community know. So they've expanded with us at Heart Soul, the same group over at Jobs Ohio, Dayton Development Coalition, Springfield. All of us have gotten together into this Advanced Air Mobility Working Group, so that the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission is trying to make sure that the Hospital Association, the area, you name it, anybody that has a large footprint in how a community is put together or grown, we're all trying to speak out and start to raise this awareness as things come together here.
I think we need a field trip.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and I can pull everything together. I'll put my neck out there and say I'd be happy to pull it all together with you. And Tom Franzen is the guy at City of Springfield. You know, the BV loss is actually the great part about it. Matt, you probably saw it's that RV, you know, and they can take it all the way around. It's been at every AUVSI just about for the past 5-6 years, and it's pretty neat.
Oh, Matt's got a picture of it up there. That's fantastic. So given that we've spent a lot of time with Part 103 and ultralights, which, you know, may not have any, it may have, you know, unlicensed pilots flying aircraft without radios. Is that, I mean, it sounds like that radar structure could help us with separation with those kind of operations as well.
I'll take that one, and I would lean on Matt as well for some info, but I would say yes. The answer is yes. The whole thing was there's so many 103 sets of training. The Ohio UAS Center is there on site in that building. And then they've got Select Tech, who runs a lot of the tests that are directly next to the FBO.
Okay, so circling back to the idea of pivoting more focus to commercial operations, are there any objections to doing that? The idea is that I would make some updates to the website and sort of start down that path in beginning on with the January meeting.
Just to echo what Andy was talking about, I think most of you might have already noticed for the last probably 6 months or more, we have been inviting everyone to all the working group meetings, whether it's commercial AAM related or public service related, and of course focus on the smaller private operations and all the general topics, the legals and infrastructures and so on. So just to make sure everybody understand that if you get a meeting invite from the working groups, it may come from, the title may come from different folks and from different topics, with different topics. But we thought it's worthwhile to invite everyone to all the meetings now. That way you can pick and choose whichever you want to attend. Thanks.
Yeah, and Johnny's meetings are absolutely excellent, and I get on every one that I possibly can because it's great content and worth watching after the fact if you miss it. Okay, we've got a great speaker today. Before we move on to that, any other comments, suggestions, ideas, or interesting stories? Okay, well, today we're continuing our very important conversation about insurance. You know, as a career salesperson, insurance is very important to me because I know that we're going to need insurance to be able to get financing, and we need financing to be able to accelerate sales. So if we're talking about cash out of pocket for all these aircraft, that's a very different scenario and much more challenging than when we can work with financing companies. And to do that, we need insurance coverage. We're talking, you know, insurers like data, understandably, and predictability, and we don't necessarily have that yet, but we're building it, and we're leaning heavily on experts like Chris Proudlove, our speaker today, to tell us in the space what do we need to do to collect the data that they want and to start to build the information set that we need so that we can have predictability and insurable aircraft. And so we're lucky to have Chris Proudlove with us today. He's a senior vice president and senior underwriting manager at Global Aerospace. He's been there since 2005 and led the general aviation team in London before transitioning to the US back in 2011. He's based in New Jersey, focusing on our space as a senior vice president and senior underwriting manager. He leads their Global's unmanned and emerging technology underwriting groups. And before he was with Global, he spent 20 years in the London market and focused on international special risks. He's done a lot of writing and speaking on this space, and he's just been a real friend of the industry. Most recently, Chris was at the Vertical Flight Society's infrastructure meeting, which I think was in New Jersey. Spoke there. I'm trying to get Chris and some others in the space out to the event in February, the Vertical Flight Society, and he's just really, just like Alistair's really been there for us to help us figure out what we need to be doing. He's done a lot of writing in the space and has been involved with dozens of articles, many white papers, and most recently there was one that was just published, 7 Key Steps to Realizing the Electric Aircraft Revolution. I've pasted a link to that in the notes. Definitely take a look at that. That'll be super helpful. And what Chris had suggested today for our format, which I loved, is he said, look, I'm getting the same questions and I want everybody to have answers to these questions. So what if we do a Q&A format about some of the most commonly asked questions, walk through those. And then as we're doing that, I've got about 5 questions here that Chris is just getting all the time that he wanted to make sure everybody had the answers to those. And then think about your own. If we don't cover what you're looking for in these questions, be thinking about yours after we move through these, and we'd love to hear from you as well. But with that, welcome, Chris.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Thank you. Yeah, the event in Cape May last week was interesting because we went from a panel of 3 speakers to a panel of 1. So we had an hour and 20 minutes to talk about insurance, which was probably an hour longer than we needed, but it was good, and I was pleased to be there. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad you're doing these. It's we need all the help we can get, and you've got just a huge wealth of experience that's tremendously helpful for us.
Sure, and I think a lot of my comments today, as you talk about bridging into commercial operations, I think a lot of what I'm going to say today is geared towards really every area of electric aviation, Part 103 up to the larger commercial aircraft. So maybe this can be a springboard to talking about broader commercial operations.
Perfect. All right, here's question number 1. What's the difference between aviation insurance and other types of insurance?
Well, there are a few differences. Broadly speaking, it's very similar. Insurance is insurance, but aviation has some significant differences. The first being that it is really a very specific market. There are a relatively few number of insurance companies, both in the US and overseas, that either specialize in aviation insurance or perform any kind of aviation business at all. So it's very specific. You're not going to get insurance quotes from Geico, Allstate, Liberty, although those companies, through different investments and different entities that they're involved with, generally have. Just me?
Hey, thank you. That person muted. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. But generally all those companies have involvement in aviation in some shape or form. One of the other big differences is that aviation is a very litigious environment. It's fairly plaintiff friendly, I would say, as well. And as a result, the numbers are generally bigger for aviation insurance policies than for pretty much any other type of transportation, certainly. It isn't uncommon for us to insure corporate jets with a $500 million liability limit, and airlines buy insurance in billions of dollars. So it's definitely a market environment of large numbers, and that's relevant because as some of your operations and the broader eVTOL aircraft market starts to scale, it isn't just going to be one insurance carrier like Global Aerospace providing your insurance. You are ultimately going to need to work with a number of insurance carriers to obtain the limits required for your operation. And the other difference I would say, the last thing I would say is that it is a broker market. It's not an environment where you would approach insurance carriers directly. All the business is traded and transacted via insurance brokers. Andrew?
Yes, perfect. Thanks for bringing that up, and keep coaching us on the difference between underwriters and brokers, so that we understand the nomenclature and how to navigate the system. Next question: given that you've got new risks and new aircraft and some unknowns here, how do you go about assessing all these risks, given that you have limited data about new types of aircraft that are being certified today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's a work in progress. As we think of the initial risks, which are generally at this stage, certification flights, test flights, sales demo flights, possibly, it's presenting a very different level of risk to when we ultimately get to full commercial operations, especially in, passenger carrying aircraft. But for now, the coverage tends to be limited to liability risk. That means that we aren't insuring the vehicle itself. We're insuring the third parties on the ground. We're insuring, in some cases, occupants, but it is a pure liability risk. And really, from that perspective, we look at the environment in which the aircraft is flying. If the test flights are taking place in a highly rural desert location, for example, where there really is very little to hit, then that presents a different risk profile to the company that's operating perhaps, from a busy airport, flying circuits where there may be residential neighborhoods in the area and so on. So we really just look at that environment and try to make sure that the risk of damage or injury from a crash is as low as possible. But as we get into the kind of the next phase of things, as we start to really try to understand the different vehicles, the challenges are going to grow. And we look, we're currently thinking about and looking at a number of different aspects. And in no order, batteries are one of the biggest risks that we look at, the risk of fire. So we're starting to think really clearly about what are we looking for in terms of battery technology. How are the batteries contained? How are they manufactured? What are they made of? There's so much to that whole area of risk that we're trying to understand at the moment. So I would say that's probably top of mind right now. We think about regulations. In the Part 103 space, I think it's fair to say, and this may be a contentious thing to say, but I think that the Part 103 rules were written at a time and in an environment where we perhaps thought about those pilots in a somewhat different sense, or those aircraft in a somewhat different sense. If we're now thinking about, mass-produced electric personal vehicles, then we have to think about Part 103, what that provides, and perhaps how we want to understand that risk profile and how we interpret the rules and so on. But more broadly, if you think into commercial operations, EASA, the FAA, and other regulators are approaching this topic in somewhat different ways. So we have to think about how the regulations are going to play in to those ultimate commercial vehicles and operations as well. We think about vertiports. There are a lot of challenges around vertiports, whether it's weather related, what kind of services are going to be available, whether it's maintenance or other services locally. What does the charging infrastructure look like? Hazards, fire safety. So that's evolving and emerging. We have to think about the pilots, the crew. What sort of experience will they need to have? What kind of training are they going to need? Type certification and so on. And of course, that plays into automation and autonomy and, how things like unified flight controls are going to play into the operation of vehicles. So that's kind of a big piece of it as well. That whole kind of crew, perhaps even, you know, uncrewed or, you know, ground crewed vehicles. So that's kind of a big part of things, you know, part of the risk profile that will continue to emerge. Connectivity is also big, you know, especially for these automated vehicles that are going to be largely kind of uncrewed, even though there may be an onboard pilot. You know, what does connection look like? What happens when the connection is lost and things? So that's something that we're going to be looking at as well. And then as the industry scales, as the numbers grow, air traffic management is going to be huge. What does it mean to be urbanizing air traffic, where over the last 50 years, cities have done everything they possibly can to push air travel and aircraft as far out of the cities as possible? How does the risk profile change when aircraft perhaps become more urban in nature? So that's kind of a brief overview of the types of things that we're currently thinking about.
Yeah, and I agree with you about you know, Part 103 regulations are 40 years old. They were contemplating, you know, essentially a hang glider with a small Rotax engine. Technology is more than exceeded that, and so, you know, when we think about, you know, there not being training or certification requirement, you know, the FAA's directive is you need to do this, industry. This is you need to circle up your community, and this is on you, or we're going to have to step in. And that community is us. This working group is that community. And that can be an opportunity for us within our white paper, for example, to collectively think about, okay, we don't have to do training, but what training do we want to do? If we were to all agree as an industry, this is what we're going to do, what does that look like? And, you know, safety mechanisms, all those things. So that's something that we can be thinking about for, you know, what we want to recommend. I've been an advocate for all ultralight operators under Part 103 to be FAA pilots, and the type of pilot license that I recommend at a minimum is a Part 107 unmanned uncrewed aircraft license, because the airspace is identical, and it's, you know, that license doesn't cover how to fly the aircraft, but it certainly covers how to navigate the airspace, which is a great critical starting point. And I just got that license myself. It's not that hard, and I think worthwhile for everyone doing. I think there's probably other things like that where we can say, okay, you know, what do we recommend that everybody do collectively within this industry to keep operators safe?
I think another challenge generally for the industry, not just for us as insurers, but for the industry at large, is, you know, you have a number of different designs of aircraft, different cockpit layouts, different flight deck designs, left stick, right stick. You know, we're used to an environment where you have a yoke, you have a collective, you have a throttle, everything's generally in the same place and operates the same way. You've now got, I mean, every OEM has their own system, their own designs. And I think from a training, from just an overall piloting perspective, I think that is going to create challenges, possibly opportunities as well, but certainly challenges, I think. I don't know if the industry will ultimately coalesce around perhaps a more unified single flight deck design, but right now it seems like everyone's plowing their own fields.
100%. I've in my consulting work supported more of the Part 103 manufacturers than I haven't, and I can tell you there's a wide variety in between sitting down and intuitively flying it without any thought whatsoever. It does exactly what I thought, and being just consistently bewildered about the state of the status of the aircraft, and having talked to, you know, professional pilots that say this is super confusing to me. And I don't get it. That's a concern if it's not intuitive, because we've got, you know, 3 flight computers and millions of computations per second. It should be intuitive to the operator, and if it's not, that's an opening for an incident. Right. So I think that's a very good point. What insurance limits are typically available or potentially going to be available for eVTOL operations?
So this is an interesting one. And again, you have to bifurcate the Part 103 perhaps from larger commercial operations. But if we start, the general overview, and I've always, I mentioned some numbers earlier in the call. The billions of dollars that are available for some airlines, even large commercial rotor wing companies are buying insurance limits up in the hundreds of millions. But when you then look at perhaps probably a better analogy from the commercial perspective would be a Las Vegas tour operator, let's say, not high net worth individuals, but fairly well-heeled passengers, people who can afford to go to Las Vegas on vacation and fly helicopters. Those companies, those operators are typically buying limits of about $50 million. And so when I think about limits, I think that's kind of a reasonable starting point when you think about a four-seater eVTOL commercial aircraft. But when you then bring in the major airlines who will perhaps be using these aircraft as code shares or perhaps even operating them themselves, their expectation is going to be for those billion-dollar limits. So that's going to create some friction, I think. And as the insurance industry kind of wakes up to these risks, I think we're going to have to really coalesce around an approach to providing appropriate limit for these operations, noting that for the time being, they're going to be certified, of course, but essentially there is going to be some experimental nature. These are early days of electric aircraft, and so I think we have to balance the risks with the limits that we are providing. Within the Part 103 area, what I would say is that insurance for ultralights and uncertified aircraft with perhaps pilots who haven't gone through the same rigorous type of flight training, insurance is a real challenge at any level. There isn't a big insurance market for those types of risks. So when we think about electric personal vehicles with greater levels of autonomy, okay, there's benefit there. We can get our head around the fact that there are, that these are in many ways much more complex aircraft, but in some ways they're also going to be, easier to fly, much more accessible for people who don't have a high level of experience. So then we have to think about, okay, what kind of training is going into those pilots? How, what's the approach of the OEMs? Are they just selling aircraft to anyone who's prepared to pay the amount of money, or are they really making sure that their owners and operators are vetted and trained and safe before they have an aircraft delivered? So lots of things to think about there. But I think in that area, we're really looking at $1 million as a starting point, not the sort of tens or hundreds of millions that are going to be needed in the larger commercial space.
Yep, that makes sense. How does it affect things when we have a vertically integrated organization that is, for example, like Lyft Aircraft in Austin, Texas, is making a multi-copter called Hexa, and I've seen articles that they're planning to do some recreational flights within a controlled area in New York. And next month we're going to hear from Land Rotor, which is a company that is doing the same thing, not only making the aircraft but also going to be allowing people to fly it as a sort of recreation as a service type of thing. So these aircraft are being built to fly for fun, but not to take home, and flown in a controlled environment. Does that help the insurance picture if there's a watchful eye there and it's flown under the control or some control of the manufacturer?
I think there are advantages, perhaps from a risk perspective, to having a vertically integrated structure. You're not subcontracting certain functions to companies that maybe don't have the same level of understanding and experience. from a risk perspective, it definitely creates some challenges. We are used to an environment where risk is spread amongst a number of different entities involved in that risk chain. It'll be the aircraft operator, the OEM, perhaps the avionics manufacturer, the engine manufacturer. Depending on the nature of the accident, you could have, and we very often have, 3, 4, 5 parties involved in any one accident scenario. It's fertile ground for the plaintiff lawyers and even defense lawyers at that point. But we can spread some of that risk as insurers amongst the different parties who have involvement in that accident, or perhaps are alleged to have involvement. So in a typical catastrophic accident, there will be something paid by the operator's insurance, perhaps something paid by the OEM insurance. It depends on the case. In a vertically integrated operation, we've really got one entity that is taking all the risk. So that's going to have an impact on premium, of course. But it also creates challenges. There's a trend right now in the aircraft world in general, especially with the use of composites and new engine designs and so on, where it's becoming harder for us as insurers to repair aircraft where we have a number of different companies prepared and able to bid for that work. There are constraints around part supply, of course, and other issues that we've been dealing with for the last 3-4 years, COVID and beyond. But beyond that, there are certain engines where we have to go to the OEM for repairs. So we are limited to a single repair option, and that's not good from a cost perspective. We really lose that ability to negotiate and bargain and try to do deals and help bring the price down for everybody. So again, in a vertically integrated environment, there's really going to be only one company that will be able to provide maintenance and repair for that aircraft. So that it's not impossible. These are all issues that we can work around, but it does have an implication for how we manage cost.
Okay, excellent. We have 15 minutes, and I just have one question left, and then if others have questions for Chris, love to open up the floor. But this is just a general one. What advice do you have for new companies?
This is an easy one. It really is about engaging with insurers early, engage with them often, treat them as partners, treat insurers as investors even. And I make this point in a serious way. We are putting up, in some cases, tens of millions of dollars of our capital to allow electric aircraft businesses to develop and grow. That sounds like an investor. We're not actually physically writing a check, but we are putting up our capital in a risk transfer environment. So try and avoid the Friday night, oh shoot, we're flying tomorrow, we better buy insurance. That's not going to lead to a particularly successful outcome for anybody. So engage early, find a broker that you know and you trust and you like. There have been a few engaged with this group. Laura O'Donnell from Marsh McLennan, she was part of the panel down in Cape May. I think she presented to the group maybe 6 months ago. But there are lots of insurance brokers who specialize in aviation insurance, and they will help lead you through the process. But just try to think about the insurance piece of the jigsaw as an important one that you should develop early. Build that partnership, because as you grow, and perhaps even as you have claims and accidents along the way, develop a partnership with a company that's going to be there for you as your business develops.
Fantastic. Excellent. What questions do people have for Chris?
Hey, Chris.
Johnny?
It's Johnny. Hey, impressive insight. Thank you so very much. This is incredible absorbing a lot of knowledge. I have a little firsthand engagement with the aviation insurance. Yeah, it's complex. It's tedious. But I have a general question for you. That we talk about the two spectrum, and one is the megabuck or billion-dollar corporation airlines and so on. Large OEMs, and we also covered 103, but there's still a whole bunch of traditional general aviation operator, pilot owners, or corporate level, or even down to the light sports category airplanes. Is there any lesson we can learn from that middle ground or lower bias toward the lower end of the coverage of the cost? Any lesson we can learn? Anything that we are doing today could be applicable to the AAM eVTOL world?
That's a big question. I mean, clearly there are lessons from aviation over the years, as regards to testing and pilot training and so on. I would say that perhaps one thing to bear in mind is that accidents will happen. There will be claims. There are going to be bumps along the road. This is not going to be perfect. We've already had some claims in this sector, and I think when companies are building out these new aircraft and they're smart, intuitive aircraft, I think that a level of humility and vulnerability is important, because I think we have to assume that there are going to be accidents. And what is often presented to us is the case that we've thought of everything. We have multiple redundancies. This thing is bulletproof, and that's great, and we really hope that is the case. But I think we have to be realistic here that this is not going to be a perfect growth curve. There are definitely going to be bumps along the way. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but clearly from a technical perspective, there are umpteen lessons to be learned. I'm probably the wrong person to speak to that aspect.
Thank you. Great input. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, but I've been rattling them off. I want to give everybody else a turn. And Matt, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Appreciate it. One of the issues we're coming up against is common sense would say that for our given aircraft, such as the Air One that we're conducting initial flight testing for, it's intended to be a piloted aircraft. We've always preferred to do uncrewed remote pilot testing for the obvious reasons of not risking a human being. In the FAA certification realm, that's infinitely harder than having a piloted aircraft, even in line of sight conditions. From an insurance perspective, for a given set of flight testing for a given aircraft, what is the difference in which one do you guys look at as higher risk, therefore higher premium, crewed or uncrewed for line of sight?
I think an onboard pilot is generally a good thing. I think it depends on the level of involvement that the pilot has, their ability to take control. If they're simply adding weight to the aircraft in order to check that FAA box, that may not be so positive. But if they are able to take control and able to have positive input on the aircraft operation, then I think it's positive. From our perspective, I'll be crude about this. It really depends on the level of liability created by that onboard pilot. If that onboard pilot is an employee of the company and they're covered under a workers' compensation scheme, that is not going to involve us as aviation insurers, then it really makes little difference from our perspective in terms of a dollar risk profile. If that pilot is not an employee, if your company has a relationship with that individual that puts them in the position almost more as being a passenger than a pilot, and you have some liability to them that needs to be covered off by insurance, then that's going to have an impact on premium, and that's going to have an impact on the level of risk that we are taking. But aside from that, I would say, you know, each aircraft has its own capabilities and design features, and but, you know, generally speaking, going back to Johnny's question, you know, generally speaking, pilots are a good thing. We have found over the years that 2 pilots are better than 1 pilot in pretty much every situation. So, you know, I wouldn't want to sit here and argue against onboard pilots, but I'm obviously very cognizant of the fact that many of these aircraft are being designed to create a different relationship to the onboard pilot, or perhaps even not have an onboard pilot at all. And we have to think about that.
Yeah, ours is strictly, you know, it has stability augmentation systems, but our aircraft is strictly a piloted aircraft. It's either a pilot on the ground or a pilot in the aircraft. They both have identical control authority. So,
yeah.
Okay, so if I heard you right, if it's a direct employee conducting the flight test, then it's a wash between crewed or uncrewed in terms of premium rates.
If there's no coverage on the policy for that individual, correct.
Okay, and then if it was let's say a contractor, crewed, you know, crew versus a remote pilot, then crewed would be higher because STOL's on board. Yeah,
correct. Yep.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Julia, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Julia from Reed Smith. Chris, really appreciate the discussion here. So one of my questions might have kind of been answered in the previous discussion, but the other one, I'm curious, you know, in your research, you just said that the number of pilots really a thing in terms of policies, the money that airline manufacturers are paying.
Your connection is poor. I'm not really
resonate
catching the question.
Crashes, meaning that oftentimes, at least in large traditional.
Hey, Julia, we're breaking up a lot, and we're not able to hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh, geez. Is this any better?
That's better. Or at least it was for a second.
We had you for a moment there.
What? Do you want to put your question in the chat?
My connection might be.
Julia, if you type it into the chat, I'll read it. And then I have a quick question for Chris and also for Alistair. Obviously, we'd love to work directly with you guys. We can't. How do we find a great broker?
You can certainly contact me, and I can provide you a list of companies. You can go onto good old Google and type in aviation insurance broker, and you'll have pages and pages of results. I think it depends. So in general terms, what I would say is it's going to depend on your business. If you are looking for a multinational broker that has the ability to perhaps provide insurance across different continents, if you're looking for more kind of a mid-sized broker that maybe has more national reach, but maybe has a larger team, or if you're looking for a smaller broker that is dedicated to aviation, where you might get more personalized service because they're a smaller team. You may find a kind of different level of policy management in that area. So it really depends on what you're looking for. But if not in a broad sense, but in a one-to-one environment, I would certainly be happy to provide some links.
That makes sense. Okay, so we can circle up with you. You've got a list of broker partners that you've been working with, and based on the needs of the organization, you can make some recommendations.
Yeah.
I
Excellent.
want to step in here too. Chris, good conversation today. Thanks a lot. I'm on Laura's team, so I work with Laura and closely with our team at Marsh, Rich and Acela. So, I mean, if you guys do want to talk to a broker, I mean, we're happy to help as well. Kind of decide where you need to be from a global standpoint. More intimate team, we can help on both levels. So, love to have those conversations too.
Yeah, and everyone, as Chris mentioned correctly, Laura and Charlie did a great presentation for us about 6 months ago. If you go to the all the way to the top of the chat under working group #1 microsite, that's got all the past presentations like these, and you can go and review the one that Charlie and Laura did. Excellent stuff, and their wealth of knowledge as well. And absolutely reach out and contact them to ask questions.
And Chris, thanks for your participation in the infrastructure meeting the other week. I know that went well. So they presented in person up in New Jersey too. So that's great.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie.
That brings us to the top of the hour. Julia sent a note that she's going to just send her question directly to Chris so she can get that sorted out. But Chris, thank you so much for your contribution to this group and to the industry in general. You've been really busy traveling the world, answering all of our crazy questions, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
I enjoy it. It's fun. Thank you, Andrew, for inviting me, and good luck, everybody.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Great session today. Thanks for your contributions.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.